let's talk about this even further. Why is this trip even happening with national security expert Hal Kempfer? And Hal, good to see you. I know we were kind of anticipating this offline. You were talking to me about let's talk about this. This is very important. But it is, I don't think, a secret, and maybe it is to some of the viewers, that Taiwan right now, Hal, is losing allies worldwide. Just last weekend, it lost Honduras. Honduras going to China's side. So there's a lot of switching going on. What are we to make of that? Why is that happening right now?
Andrew, it's a kind of an interesting thing that I spent a lot of years running around the Pacific, shall we say, going to various Pacific island nations, and there was still a legacy going back from the 1950s, 60s, early 70s, where Taiwan, which represented the Kuomintang, the Republic of China government, was recognized as the legitimate government of all of China, even though since 1949, that entire government has been centered on Taiwan. And of course, Communist China, or the CCP, the Communist, the Communist China's People's Party, which is mainland China, they actually do control China. Now, we switched in the 1970s to what has essentially become what we call the One China policy, where we recognize that China, the PRC, the People's Republic of China, does represent China. They sit in the United Nations. They're the ones that sit in the permanent seat in the Security Council of the United Nations. We recognize that, but we also recognize the separate nature of Taiwan, and there is a certain amount of strategic ambiguity there in terms of what we'll do. Now, President Biden's made it very clear that we will defend Taiwan. All right. With that, though, around the Pacific and in certain other countries like Central America, for example, there were still the official embassy for China was Taiwan, was the Republic of China. And they just lost that. They lost it recently in Solomons. They've lost it, this last week in the Honduras. And this was kind of shore up their base, if you will. They went to those countries, Belize, Guatemala, that still recognize the Republic of China as representing China, and basically shoring up that relationship. Doing so, this transit thing where they transit through New York and then they transit up through Los Angeles. And those of us look on the map here, those aren't straight lines, okay? There's a little bit of, we all kind of know that they don't have to go through Los Angeles to get to back to Taipei. Same thing with New York is not the straightest path from Taipei to Belize, for example. These transit trips are to meet U.S. congressmen, senior leaders in the U.S., and of course to shore up that relationship there, and that's kind of what you see. It's a political trip, is what it is.
Okay, Hal, we are getting some reaction in from the Chinese embassy. I want to read this. They say the Chinese ambassador, or a spokesman rather, I would like to reiterate that the Chinese side strongly opposes any form of official interaction between the U.S. and Taiwan, strongly opposes any visit to the U.S. by the leader of the Taiwan authorities, regardless of the rationale or pretext, and strongly opposes all forms of contact of the U.S. officials with the Taiwan authorities. So, China does not abide by this. China does not abide by Taiwanese leaders doing any diplomacy with anyone. So how will they respond? How will they react? And why do they take this approach?
Well, they have a little subtle language they use today. We say one China policy. They use the term one China principle. Not a subtle distinction. It wasn't a mistake of language by any means. What they're saying is they view Taiwan as this kind of rogue province, and they see the president of Taiwan as kind of this rogue governor of that rogue province. And they believe that everything dealing with Taiwan should go through Beijing. And that's not what we've agreed to. It's not what most nations in the world have agreed to. And so they take this, they've been using the term principle instead of policy. And this is a shift, but everyone's avoiding that type of language. And they've been backing it up. Yesterday, they were flying across the air defense zone. They just sent a carrier task force. And keep in mind, their carriers are a little bit smaller, or quite a bit smaller than our carriers. But a carrier task force just went off the Taiwanese coast to make a statement there. And also, they've announced something that hasn't got as much attention as it should, that they're going to start stopping ships going through the Taiwan Straits. Now, this is international waterway, a very busy international waterway, which they claim as their waters. And so they're going to start doing stops of ships transiting those waters. And that's probably the one to watch for, because we're not quite sure where that will end and what sort of potential confrontation that could lead to. So they are taking, so it's beyond the language to more substantive acts that they're doing. They also did a major exercise, a military exercise last weekend. They didn't do it like with Pelosi's visit, where they did it concurrent with the visit, but they have made a number of military exercises or operations, military maneuvers, if you will, to express their dissatisfaction beyond the very heavy rhetoric that they've been using.
Yeah, and Hal, we just showed our viewers kind of that bilateral press conference there. So what do you think happens next? Because one of the main concerns is that China is becoming ever more belligerent and bellicose when it comes to Taiwan, so much so that U.S. officials are worried about all-out war. So much so President Biden has said several times that he will use the U.S. military to defend Taiwan, going even beyond the one China policy and the strategic ambiguity that has been in place for some 25, 30 years. So would you categorize or characterize the U.S. policy toward Taiwan in flux right now? Does it need to be meted out a little bit more?
Well, it is in flux. I would say it's at different levels. You know, for example, Ukraine and China's backing of Russia. That's one area, and that's where you find tremendous unity throughout Europe and elsewhere with the U.S. in terms of how we deal with China on that issue, putting pressure on them not to send weapons. On the other hand, you see today President Macron and a very distinguished group of French businessmen and officials are in China, the PRC, on an official trip, and they've been talking about not ratcheting back cooperation and investment with China. So there's that other level there too. And even ours, you may see a reaction, which is very typical. We do what's called FONs, or freedom of navigation exercises, where we will take U.S. ships and we will run through the Taiwan Straits, particularly with this announcement that they're going to be stopping ships in the Taiwan Strait. And they haven't said they're going to stop warships or other Navy ships, but we may kind of push that a little bit just to make a statement that we don't recognize their authority to do that. And we may react if any of our ships are stopped in those waterways. That's one of the things you're going to see. And you may see things a little bit further afield.
Okay.
We have just tightened up our relationship with the Philippines.
Right.
You may see some joint patrols and things like that. So that's kind of what I foresee.
All right. Hal, thank you so much for your context and insight into this pretty big visit today. Remember, there was talk a couple of weeks ago that Speaker McCarthy would go to Taiwan. That was kind of scuttled there. And so now Tsai Ing-wen visiting California today, and we'll see any more fallout from this trip. Hal, thanks so much. See you again.